You are now tuning into the Resilient Podcast. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 47 of the Resilient Podcast. I am your host, Rob Aurelius, and today we're diving into something many of us struggle with, and that is ignoring the red flags. You know, sometimes we see the signs, we see the warnings, and we ignore them. And when we ignore them, usually we ignore them, whether in relationships, friendships, or even within ourselves. So I've unfortunately have been a victim of ignoring the red flags I don't know. But today I want to talk to you all about these red flags that we ignore, and I want to reflect on those moments. I want to reflect on what they've taught me and how we can turn awareness into resilience. So let's talk about, before we get into that, I just wanted to say that, it's been a long month. January's always seems long, right? It's only 31 days, but it seems so long. It feels like it's been forever. It feels like it's been like 5 weeks, 6 weeks of January, but it's been a long month for me. It's been pretty dreadful. I've been really busy trying to keep myself occupied. So guys, I'm sorry that it took me a while to get you this episode, but I finally am doing it. I'm finally here. Today's Saturday. It's the last day of the month. February 1st is tomorrow, Sunday. And then Monday, I am off to my first trip to Philadelphia for the year. And, before you guys say, oh no, why is he going to Philadelphia again? On Monday, WWE is having their first Monday Night Raw in Philadelphia, and it's actually the show that just it's the post show after the Royal Rumble. And man, was the Royal Rumble insane earlier today. Like I watched it, and congratulations to the winners of the Royal Rumble. It's going to be a very interesting WrestleMania season this year, right? But before I get into this episode, I just wanted to say that it's been a dreadful month. A lot of changes, a lot of things. Here's the thing. I started off the year not where I wanted to. There was a lot of changes. There was a lot of things going on, a lot of surprises as well too. And, just things I wasn't expecting. But I said to myself, look, I usually suffer from seasonal depression, and sometimes when a new year starts, it's like I'm still in the old year, so I don't feel like I'm still in 2025. For maybe the first time since my seasonal depression, I'm not in that 2025 funk yet. I know there's still people that are still in that funk, that feel that they're still in 2025. Like, people are like, hey, I'm still writing 2025 on my my checks and this and that and whatnot. I'm still writing 2025 like in my signing sheets at work, because I still think it's 2025. And I'm like, I know, man, I know. January is always usually a weird month for people. Sometimes January is like the beginning of because obviously it's the beginning of a new year. So a lot of people are so excited that it's January, and they're going full, like, they're going full blown and everything, right? And sometimes people like me, um business and things don't start picking up to like February, March. The year really starts kicking off then. um and a year ago around this time, I was in Atlanta, Georgia. I went out for Monday Night Raw that they had out there in the State Farm Arena. And this time around, at the end of the year, I didn't go anywhere. I just stayed in New York, mainly because it snowed. For those that are out in the East Coast, that we got hit with some snow. It could have been worse, right? I mean, here's the thing: I can't really talk because I don't know how bad it was for others, but for the most part, it wasn't too bad for us here in New York City. So it's been cold, right? It's been cold. It's winter time, and a lot of people keep saying, "Oh my God, why is it so cold?" And this and this. And I was like, "Listen, it's winter." And they did say that it was going to be a very cold winter. I'm not sure if you guys remember, but 2024, our winter was a pretty dry. Like we had a pretty dry fall, pretty dry winter. There was fires that were breaking out because of how dry the weather was. And they told us that 2025 winter, slash 2026 was going to be brutal, and we're getting it. We're getting it. It's been really cold. And thankfully I've been taking my vitamins. I've been taking my immunity shots every single morning, with my ginger and vitamin C and all the stuff that that it's put into it to just make sure that I feel good. Because I will say this: during the holiday season, a lot of people around me were sick, and I didn't get sick once. And it's mainly because I'm just always taking my vitamins, and I'm taking Nala's, CBD, every single day, especially, for inflammation, even on the days that I don't feel much inflammation. Another thing I've been taking a lot is mullein leaf. So we'll get into that a little later on, when it's time to talk about, the sponsorships and whatnot. But, I'm glad that throughout, this winter, for the most part, I was under the weather maybe for a day or two, but it was nothing serious. I know a lot of people were getting the flu. A lot of people were talking about getting COVID again. And I'm glad I wasn't one of those people. So, folks, if you've been sick, I'm sorry to hear that, and I really hope you recover soon. Take extreme measures to make sure that you remain not sick. And I would advise people just to start taking vitamins every single day. Especially vitamin C. Take a lot of vitamin C. Take a lot of zinc. Take a lot of vitamin D and magnesium, especially magnesium, because magnesium is really, really good. But let's talk about recognizing the patterns when it comes to ignoring the flags. And I've been thinking a lot about the times that I've ignored red flags. And I'll be honest, it hasn't served me at all. There's this tendency to hope, like to believe, to convince ourselves that everything will work out if we just try harder. But the truth is, ignoring what your intuition is telling you only leads you to heartbreak. Cha-ching. It leads you to heartbreak. It leads you to frustration and wasted energy. Through this journey of mine, I've realized that resilience isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about learning from them and setting boundaries that honor yourself. Because not every red flag is a failure. Sometimes it's a lesson in self-awareness. And I talked about our intuition. So let's talk about trusting your intuition. to me, intuition is one of our greatest tools, but listening isn't always easy. Sometimes we ignore it because we fear being alone, and that was one of my biggest issues, was having that feeling like I don't want to be alone. So, these relationships that I had that failed is because I didn't want to be alone. I wanted to be with someone, and I was dealing with a lot. I was dealing with, relationships where I wasn't fully healed, and I was the toxic one. I was in relationships where I was better than my past relationship, because you're supposed to learn from these relationships. Every relationship is supposed to teach you something. But like my last relationship, I felt like I was with a woman who still didn't, she was still trying to figure it out. And unfortunately, I sacrificed myself in those months that I was with her to make her realize everything that she needed to realize. I remember when we were talking about, when we broke up, in that conversation where we had broken up, I remember her talking about, she was looking for that light. And that one day she was looking in the mirror and she realized that the light was her, because she was looking for the light the entire time. And I guess it took our relationship for her to realize what she wanted. Because look, after we broke up, her healing process was way much better than mine's. She wasn't podcasting. She wasn't out there talking to friends constantly about, and here's the thing, this is what I assume, you don't really know, but I have a strong feeling that she didn't take this breakup as serious as I did. I don't think that she cared enough about like the aftermath of anything. I don't think she cared about like post relationship. I think all she cared about was like, look, I'm going to become an officer. I'm going to go to, I'm going to go to my academy. I'm going to do what I need to do. And boom. And, over time, when I would just look sometimes at her activity on social media, I would say, wow, she's a happy person. Like I remember like a few weeks after our breakup, she was out, and I was still following her at the time on social media before we unfollowed each other, because I had, unfortunately I had unfollowed her first, and she went out to Coachella and she looked great, because like I said, the last time I saw her, February 13, 2024, I went to her house in Philly, and she had lost so much muscle mass, and she had lost she was always a nice, thick and curvy woman, but when I last saw her, she was in great shape, probably the best shape she's ever been in, or had ever been in her entire life. And I remember the sadness that I felt, saying, damn, she looks so good, but there's a possibility that I'm not going to be able to enjoy this version of her. And I didn't, because we broke up a month later. But, fast forward after the breakup, when she was out in Coachella in April, she looked so happy. And, I remember talking to my therapist about it, and I said, look, this is where I feel like I was the problem. And my therapist is like, Rob, we talked about this. We talked about what you could have done better. We talked about what, where you were at fault and whatnot. She even told you when you guys broke up what she felt you needed to fix and what you needed to work on. She never indicated that you was a bad boyfriend. She never indicated that you treated her bad. She never indicated that you were toxic. She never indicated that you didn't care about her. Things that women will bring up, so she's like, look, did she fully admit to like her wrongs and talking about what she could have done better? No, but she did put it out. She did put out pieces like, I'm about to, get involved in something, in a career where I'm going to have to test my might, and I'm going to have to do this, and I'm going to have to do that, and I'm going to have to be emotionally intelligent. So it's like, she was, in a way admitting like, these are the things that I need to strengthen. But, when I saw the picture of her, um, out in Coachella, I was like, man, she's out there enjoying herself, probably not even thinking that she just went through a breakup. And I remember a few months ago, actually more than a few months ago, this was actually back in May, a few days before my birthday, when I found out that she graduated from the police academy in Philadelphia. I had seen her picture and I said, wow, she did it. She succeeded. She did what she wanted to do. She went for it and she got it. And I remember telling my therapist, and I may have mentioned it on this podcast. I definitely said it to my friend Stephanie, and I said it to a few people close to me. And I was like, listen, man, when I saw those pictures, I didn't see the woman that I once was in love with. I didn't see the woman that I wanted to propose to, the woman that I wanted in my life forever. And they said, well, what changed? What did you see? I was like, I just saw a woman. And I was like, well, that's part of the healing process, Rob. It's been a while. You haven't seen her. The last time you saw her, she was your girlfriend. When you guys broke up, you guys didn't break up in person. So, and you didn't talk to her after March 21st on the phone ever again. I was like, no, I didn't. Never heard her voice on the phone ever again. And in April, when she found out that I had unfollowed her on social media, she shared some words with me and, via text, and that was it. And I was like, man, that whole rest of the year of 2024 was so dreadful. It was so painful to know that this woman didn't want to say anything to me. And then I remember when her birthday passed that year, November 19th, 2024, the day that I launched the Resilience Tribune, and I sent her that message, happy birthday. She left me unread, and I don't know if she knew it was my number. I don't know if she knew it was me, but it was painful. It really was. And, the whole thing about being alone, it's something that we have to work on. And this is why I talk about, intuition being, our greatest tools. So here's the thing. I did say that sometimes we ignore it because we, fear being alone, but you got to understand it's because we want a certain outcome, right? Or maybe it's because we've been taught to tolerate discomfort. But, I've learned that resilience includes trusting yourself, even when it's hard, and recognizing red flags early is actually a gift because it's saving you from pain you don't need to experience. So I remember when I was coming up with the idea of doing this episode, and it's something that I do with my friends now. Sometimes I'll talk to my friends on the phone. Sometimes I'll go out with my friends for a drink and whatnot. So, this was actually a few days before it snowed. I was catching up with a friend of mine from Florida, and we were having a conversation, and my friend FaceTimes me because they're like, I want to see you. I've been talking to you on the phone for like 20 minutes, but I want to see you. I want to see what you look like right now. And I was like, I haven't changed. Like you're going to see the same person you always see. And they're like, you look good, Rob. You look really good. Your skin's good. And I was like, thank you. I was like, you're getting ready for 40 in the next few months. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for 40 or if I'm getting ready for 40, but I guess I'm preparing for it. Right. So my friend was like, listen, I like how you've been taking time to go over these episodes and dissect them before you even do them. And, I wanted to ask you, what's the next episode going to be on? And I said, it's going to be about ignoring the red flags. So my friend was like, oh, wow, red flags, red flags. Are you ever going to do an episode about green flags? And I said, most likely I will. Most likely I will. We're still talking about healing, right? We're still talking. This is the Resilient Podcast. So we're talking about healing. We're talking about overcoming. We're talking about being resilient. So my friend, asked me, during our phone conversation, this is literally what they said. They were like, listen, man, ignoring red flags, man, sometimes can really, 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 really be dangerous. I was like, well, yes, red flags are dangerous. That's what they are. I was like, yeah, but they could be really dangerous when we ignore them. So my friend literally asks me, why do we keep ignoring red flags? Like, why do you think us as humans, we ignore red flags when we know that these are red flags, but why do you think we keep ignoring them? And I said, look, I've had this conversation with my therapist, and, I think it's because sometimes hope can be blinding, because, we want things to be different than they are, but, we've been taught to compromise and, to forgive and sometimes to justify. And, here's the thing. Awareness comes first. Actions come second. And my friend's like, whoa, okay. I'm like, yeah. Awareness comes first and actions come second. You got to make yourself aware of something and then act on it afterwards, So my friend's like, okay, so question, how can we stop repeating these patterns? And I said to them, well, self-reflection is key. And, for me, journaling, talking to friends like you, therapy, anything that forces you to examine the reoccurring behaviors in your life. That's one way of stopping those patterns being repeated. So I said, look, we got to recognize the pattern and you name it and you choose differently the next time. And my friend's like, okay, great. Good answer. So then my friend goes on to ask me, so Rob, I have another question for you. What does it feel like when you finally acknowledge a red flag? And I was like, ooh, when you finally acknowledge a red flag. Listen, when you finally acknowledge a red flag, it's a relief and like heartbreak all at once. Relief because you're finally listening to yourself, right? Because heartbreak, you realize what you've been ignoring. During the heartbreak, you realize what you've been ignoring. But that heartbreak, remember, it's temporary. But remember that the lesson of that heartbreak is what lasts forever. And like when me and my ex-girlfriend broke up, the heartbreak was so difficult. And I remember saying, like, how am I going to get over this? How the hell am I going to get over this heartbreak? But I remember saying, these lessons are going to teach me to never allow another woman or a person to come into my life, whether it's a friendship, relationship, whatever it is. I cannot let another person come into my life and treat me the way that this woman treated me and get away with it. And walk away at the end and act so nonchalant and act so dismissive about everything. I can't let that happen again. So my friend asked me, how do you honor yourself without becoming cynical? And I said, well, boundaries and self-awareness. You don't need to shut down. You just need to respect yourself enough to walk away from what isn't healthy or aligned with who you are. And my friend was like, oh, that's beautiful. Appreciate it. And I was like, it's the truth. It's just the truth, you know? So my friend asks me, it's 2026 now. 2025, you was, dealing with resiliency, and 2024, you was still struggling with, everything, like just dealing with, the pain. You started this podcast, then you started the documentary, you started filming the documentary. The documentary is not out yet. And I'm like, no, it's not. So my friend's like, how have red flags helped you grow as a person? And I was like, I sat there, I thought about it, and then I responded to them. They've taught me patience, discreetment, and the importance of trusting my instincts. Because ignoring them in the past brought lots of lessons. But, recognizing them now brings me so much freedom. And that's why I feel like I was going around telling people last year, we got to be resilient forever. So my friend's like, cool, great. So, I love having these conversations with my friends. I love truly having these conversations with people, talk about resilience. I had someone reach out to me on Instagram, this week, and I looked into the message they sent me went into the filter box, and I had so much spam in there, so I had to get rid of it. There's a lot of bots, a lot of stuff going on Instagram, a lot of nonsense, like all these things of, Bitcoin and, the stuff that we endure going through social media. And I'm glad that a lot of that stuff is filtered, but, I came across a message that was legit because it's from someone that's been following me for years. And one of the things they said to me was like, hey, Rob, I need to get on a podcast. I have so much I have to say. I need to, I need to let it all out. And I remember saying, like, so this person's going through stuff. But I'm like, do you feel that you need to wait to get on a podcast to talk about it? You can talk about it to somebody now. You can go talk to a therapist. Do you have a therapist? Talk to someone, vent, because, you shouldn't have to wait to get on someone's podcast to talk about what's been bothering you. I understand that you want to share it. You want to probably relive it and go through it step by step. But, don't be scared to talk to people. Really. Like I said, so it's been a rough month for the most part, and I look forward to better days. But, I do have someone right now that's been in my life for quite some time, a friend who has been very supportive. And, man, when I tell you that sometimes friends are like, they're everything. I'm just so thankful for this person. And I look forward to, being there for them whenever they are going through something. But they've been just so supportive to me, and I'm so thankful to them. And, I want to talk more about other things, but I wanted to take a quick break. But before we go on this quick break, I want to thank Matty Rock for his coffee, Matty Rock Coffee, because remember, Matty Rock Coffee is the fuel that keeps me going when I need focus and energy the most. So for those of you that are coffee lovers, you drink coffee every day, or at least you just drink coffee often. If you're looking for coffee that powers your mind and body, Matty Rock Coffee, this is it. And while I'm saying that, go on this website that's right here and use the code TRP10 at checkout for 10% off your order, courtesy of the Resilient Podcast, for tuning into the Resilient Podcast. I have coffee every morning. So Matty Rock coffee is the only coffee I've been drinking. Mind you, I had drank Bustelo my entire life, right? For like the time that I've been drinking coffee. And, I don't even drink Starbucks anymore. I mean, occasionally if I do, if I'm traveling, whatever. And, obviously I don't have Matty Rock's coffee in my possession, but I have been traveling with some of Matty's coffee. But Matty Rock's coffee is really good, man. And like I said, I want you guys to try it out. So here's the link again, right here on the screen. Click on this link. It'll take you to the website. Choose the coffee of your choice, and then enjoy a 10% discount every time you buy the coffee. So we're going to take a quick break, folks. We'll be right back, and we'll continue this conversation. Welcome back to the Resilient Podcast. This is episode 47. Again, I am your host, yours truly, Rob Aurelius. So far, I can't really complain. Even though the year's been a little tricky, one thing I gotta admit is that I've been blessed. There's so much going on in the world, all this stuff that's been happening. I was talking to friends of mine that live out in Minnesota. I was talking to friends about the situation in Minnesota, with all the stuff that's been happening, these people that, unfortunately, these authority people are just out of control. And, one of the things I was telling one of my friends was, listen, like, at least this is not happening out here in New York. At least, I can go outside every day. I can go to work every day and not worry about someone, chasing me down the block because they think I'm suspicious, or they think that I am not a legal, a citizen of this country. But I'm like, this has to stop. This has to come to an end. And it's unfortunate we live in a world like this. And, with these midterms coming up, if things don't get if things don't get back to the way they're supposed to be, there's going to be a lot of changes. And, I do have to say that during a time like this, in this country, in this world, we have to be as resilient as we can. And, while we're on that topic of, being resilient, I do want to acknowledge and talk about the Resilience Project. And I want to reflect on it, because some of you have been waiting for Resilience Project documentary, and I appreciate your patience. I know that a few weeks ago we released, I officially allowed, after some time going back and forth with Carl, who works for me at ARCG Media. Carl was like, listen, let ARCG do the PR for the Resilient Podcast. Let ARCG do your PR for the Resilient Tribune. Because, when the Resilient Tribune comes out, you're going to need press. You're going to need all these things. And I was like, yeah. And I've always said, like, look, I created the Resilient Tribune because I wanted to keep the Resilient Tribune, the Resilient Podcast and ARCG separate. But, we found a way to make it work. And Carl was like, let me just, what's been going on? Like, where are we with the project? And I said, listen, post-production has been a pain. So he's like, all right, so let's make an announcement that we are not going to release the documentary soon. We are going to release it soon, but not soon enough. And let's make some changes. So finally, a few weeks ago, there was a press. And if you go to our website, resilienttribune.com, right here, it will actually take you to the website, and you'll see that, PR blast that went out to pretty much clear the air about everything that's been going on with the project. And I'm excited to announce that it will be released soon, and the date for that release is going to be March 21st. And the reason why March 21st, and I'll get into that. I'm just glad that we were at one point, because it was an idea from Diego's, was to split the documentary to 2 parts. And then when there was some transitions, I decided to go with 3 parts, but here's the thing. Even though I wanted to do 3 parts, nobody liked that idea. Nobody liked the idea of 3 parts. So I ended up just, putting it right back to 1 full episode, which will be 60 minutes. The documentary will be an hour long. And, like I said, it's not 2 or 3 parts. And, speaking about March 21st, the date is intentional because it marks 2 years since APA and I broke up. And it's a moment, to share the journey fully, the heartbreak, the growth, the resilience, and the lessons that came from ignoring and learning from the red flags in my life. So this documentary, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, isn't just a story about the past. It's a story about how we can turn pain into purpose, mistakes into wisdom, and heartbreak into strength. So I really look forward to the documentary officially releasing on YouTube on March 21st, 2026, which is right around the corner, because today is January 31st, tomorrow's February 1st, and we will have about a month and a half until we see finally the Resilience Tribune project that, we had worked on for so long, the Resilience Project. And I look so forward to it. And again, I have to take the time to thank those that were involved, everyone that's been so supportive. I know that I've had a lot of people reaching out to me. Just the other day, I had a lot of people reaching out to me like, hey, it's January 23rd. Where's part 1? And I was like, go on the website, check out our social media. We've posted information on there. And I had one guy reach out to me, and I feel so bad. His name is Jerry. And he's like, come on, man. It's been pushed again. He's like, I've been waiting to see this documentary, man. And I was like, I'm sorry. I was trying to have the documentary out late last year. But, there were just so many things that happened that, unfortunately, sometimes you just can't avoid. So, folks, I'm just so excited for this documentary to finally come out. And I'm also excited because in March, we are going to be reaching our 50th episode, God willing. And then we're also having the documentary. And then April comes, and April, it's going to be springtime, and I'm not sure yet if I'm going to be in Las Vegas for WrestleMania this year, to be honest, because I have so much going on. Because the thing is, after the documentary comes out, it's going to be go time. It's going to be a lot of press, a lot of media, a lot of stuff. So I'm hoping that I could be able to go to WrestleMania this year. I'll keep you guys posted on that. But listen, man, all I can say is it's been a ride. It's been a ride. And how I've been able to remain sane with all of this is just making peace with everything and being resilient. I was the type of person that had no patience for things. I was the type of person that, if things didn't go my way, it would just be chaos. But I've learned over time that, we got to be easy. We got to take things easy. We got to be patient. There's a lot of things in this world that happen, and patience is a virtue. It really is. And I feel like as we get older, we're supposed to become more patient with things. And I feel like I've finally reached that part in my life where a lot of things I'm understanding a little more now. I'm being a little bit more patient with it. And I'm just really trying to make peace with a lot of stuff. And also, when I talk about what keeps, like what's kept me calm, Victor's products, Nala Health, and I spoke about it earlier. So, before we close this episode, I do want to say thank you to Victor and Nala Health again, like I always do, because, Victor's products always offer clean, sustainable, and effective wellness products for the resilient spirit. That's just how I feel about it. So remember, when you visit Victor's website, which is right here, nalahealth.com, you can save 10% on your next purchase with the code TRP10 at checkout. And remember, health and resilience goes hand in hand, and Nala Health helps make your body keep up with the journey of growth. And that's very, very important. So again, thank you, Victor. I appreciate you so much. This is the last day of the month, and this month is officially CBD month, National CBD month. So CBD's really, really, really helped me a lot. I haven't had any mental breakdowns. I haven't had, one of the things people were scared about was my health. And they're like, listen, like, you can have a stroke over this. You can have a brain aneurysm over this. You can have so many things that can happen to you. And I feel like none of that happened because I've tried to remain resilient, and I've been using Victor's products a lot, especially anxiety, and insomnia. So, folks, in today's cards of James, there's a card right here that says there's something in you that the world needs. And I want you all to remember that. There's something in you that the world needs. When I think about myself, I think about all the stuff that I've been through in my life. And I think about my childhood. I think about everything that I've endured. And growing up, unfortunately, with a lot of those patterns and a lot of those tendencies, and doing what I needed to do to overcome all those things, to try to become a better person. So the first thing I did to change all of that was I acknowledged that I was the problem in a lot of the things that were happening in my life. And I remember when I was in a relationship one time, and I was constantly complaining to an ex-girlfriend of mine, and my ex-girlfriend literally says to me one day, well, Rob, I hear what you're saying, but have you ever thought about whenever these things are happening to you that maybe you could be the common denominator? And like I said, I remember feeling so offended about it, but then I was like, you know what? Maybe they got a point. And, this was already during my therapy. So I remember like telling my therapist, like, hey, this is what my ex was telling me. This is the feedback that my ex provided. And I've worked on that. I've always, tried to understand like the role that we play in situations, no matter what it is, even if it's somebody doing wrong to us. Why are we allowing it? How do we get there? How do we get to that point where someone feels that they could, disrespect us or treat us the way they do? And again, it has a lot to do with the role that we play. So remember that whatever it is that you can give to the world, whether it's kindness, whether it's wisdom, whether it's advice, whatever it is, the world needs more of that. The world needs more people out there that are grateful, respectful, mindful, courteous, professional. Overall, just, people that are decent, kind, because we need that. And I want you all to remember that. So please go out there and do your best. Don't hurt anybody, because the world needs more of that, especially right now with everything that's going on in the world. everything that's currently happening right now in this country. We need more people that are awake, on their 2 feet, and they want the best for everyone, including themselves. So this episode is coming to an end, but before it does, I want to leave you all with this. We talked about red flags, and noticing red flags isn't a weakness. It's courage. Honoring them isn't, it's not being cynical, it's wisdom. And moving forward after acknowledging them is where true resilience lies. So I want to thank you all for listening to this episode. And thank you for, like I always do, I always thank you for being part of this journey with me. And I want you to explore the Resilience Tribune. When you get a chance, go to our website, resiliencetribune.com. If you want to share a story with us on the Resilience Tribune platform, reach out to us. Info's right here. And literally info at theresiliencetribune.com. Or reach out to us on social media. You can see it here on the bottom. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at TheResilientPod. And also don't, make sure to check out our merch, Resilience Tribune merch, by visiting our website and then going to TRP shop right there. Because, shout out to For Your Wear, first of all. But, For Your Wear, Blue, who's the guy behind this, great dude. He definitely had one of the most resilient years of his life last year. He had a few tragedies, and he sent out a message in the beginning of the year to everyone, and I think it was very beautiful. And we wouldn't have merch without him. So I appreciate Blue from the bottom of my heart. So folks, just make sure that you mark your calendars for the Resilient Project documentary, because it's coming out March 21st, 2026. And I truly appreciate you all from the bottom of my heart. And I look forward to episode 48, which will be soon, hopefully in a week or two, February. Because remember, February is a short month, so I'll try to have those episodes out to you guys as soon as I can. And remember to always remain resilient, stay aware, and stay true to yourself. On behalf of the Resilient Podcast, I'm your host, Rob Aurelius. Thank you for tuning in. And again, I'll see you all soon. Peace.